The soft murmur of conversation and the steady beep of checkout scanners fill the air inside a bustling supermarket in Sacramento, California. It's a typical Tuesday evening. Shoppers move leisurely through the aisles, picking up everything from fresh produce to frozen dinners. Among them is Nathaniel Davis, a 48-year-old former senior military officer who moonlights as a logistics clerk. Dressed in a simple navy blue sweatshirt and jeans, he looks no different from the other shoppers. The uniform he puts on every morning is neatly folded at home. He pushes his small cart through the dairy section, looking for a carton of almond milk. But then he senses something strange. A gaze lingers on him. Turning slightly, he spots a white policewoman standing at the edge of the aisle. Her neat uniform stands out from the crowd. But she's not shopping. She's watching. Nathaniel didn't think much of it at first. His years in the military had taught him not to jump to conclusions. He nodded politely at her, but her expression remained tense. Her gaze was unbroken, not casual curiosity but cold appraisal. He continued shopping, moving toward the canned goods section, but the feeling didn't fade. Every time he glanced over his shoulder, she was still there, just a little closer. Her hand was near the weapon in her holster. His anxiety grew, but he pushed it aside. Maybe she was just being cautious. But as he entered the frozen food section, her gaze didn't waver. It was clear now that this wasn't just his imagination. She was watching him. Then, suddenly, her voice rang out, sharp as a command. "Put your hands up now." Everything froze. The beeping of the checkout scanner seemed to slow down, the air seemed to freeze. The customers turned their heads, small talk died down. Nathaniel stood still, his hand still on the handle of the cart. Memories of his military training resurfaced, his heart rate slowing reflexively. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice low but steady. The policewoman pulled out her gun, pointing it at him. "I said, hands up now." A gasp rang out from the cash register. A few people pulled out their phones, starting to record. A mother pulled her child closer, backing away. The crowd wavered between curiosity and fear. Nathaniel took a deep breath. His eyes locked on the policewoman's. He slowly raised his hand, not too fast, not too slow, just enough to not create any misunderstanding. "I'm unarmed." His voice was calm, but there was a sharpness hidden within. The policewoman still didn't lower her gun. The tension spread. A supermarket employee stood frozen near the bread counter. A middle-aged man in a suit tightened his grip on his shopping cart. Everyone waited for something, an answer, a move, or worse, a shooting. But then, another voice spoke up. "Wait. I know him. He's Nathaniel Davis, a veteran." All eyes turned to the man who had spoken, an elderly man with gray hair, still clutching the egg carton. His face was full of concern. "He's not a criminal. This is a hero of this country." The words stirred the crowd. A few people began to nod, a few murmurs of agreement. The atmosphere changed. The policewoman blinked, hesitation flickering in her eyes. She looked around, realizing that all eyes were on her, not in support, but in scrutiny. She swallowed, her grip on the gun tightening, then slowly, she lowered it. "Something's wrong," she muttered. Nathaniel said nothing. He just lowered his hand and took a step back. Silence fell over the supermarket. Outside, police sirens blared. It wasn't over yet. Nathaniel tightened his grip on the cart, trying to control the pounding in his chest. He forced himself to ignore the tension that coursed through his veins, but his instincts were on guard in a way he couldn't control. His eyes scanned his surroundings, not betraying any of his nervousness. This silent game of doubt was only the beginning. He stopped in front of the produce section, reaching out to grab a bunch of fresh spinach. A hard-won habit from his military days, keeping his diet simple and healthy. It was the little things that kept his spirits up. As he turned to put the vegetables in the cart, a sharp voice rang out behind him. "Excuse me, sir, I need to talk to you." Nathaniel turned, his gaze calmly meeting the officer's. He had been through more stressful situations than this. Years of making decisions in harsh environments had honed him into an impenetrable wall. "Is there a problem, officer?" His voice was calm, unruffled. She stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she appraised him from head to toe. "We've received reports of suspicious activity in the area. I need to know what you're doing here." Nathaniel blinked, sensing the absurdity of the situation. "I'm just shopping, like everyone else." He shrugged, gesturing to the half-full cart. The officer's eyes slid over the cart and back to his face. "I need to see your identification." He laughed, a dry, incredulous laugh. "Identification, for milk, spinach, and almonds." "I won't ask again, sir." Her tone was colder, her right hand resting on her gun holster, a small gesture but a clear message. The air around them became as tense as a string about to snap. Nearby shoppers paused, a few glances of curiosity and tension. Nathaniel took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "Listen," he said slowly, trying to keep his voice even. "I don't know what you think I did, but I don't need to show my ID just because I'm shopping. If there's a specific allegation, state it. If not, I want to get on with my business." The officer's face flushed slightly. "I saw you acting suspiciously. You kept pacing up and down the aisles." Nathaniel sighed, nodding slightly as if he'd just realized something. Not because he believed the unfounded accusation, but because he'd seen the same situation too many times. The tension, the hasty assumptions, and how quickly things could spiral out of control. He knew he was walking a fine line between holding his ground and defusing the situation. And at that moment, he had to decide his next step. Nathaniel walked through the supermarket aisle, his footsteps echoing normally in the artificially lit space. He was no stranger to scrutiny, but this time it carried a different weight. It wasn't a battlefield, it wasn't a military base, it was just a supermarket with neatly lined shelves and regular customers looking for dinner. And yet he was being backed into a corner. The policeman's voice cut through the air, sharp as a knife. "If you refuse to cooperate, I have no choice but to take further action." The words hung in the air, drawing the attention of those around him. Nathaniel felt his heart rate quicken. It wasn't out of fear, he had faced much more intense situations. But what was different here? Children holding their parents' hands, eyes filled with suspicion and worry. He raised his hand slightly, not too high, but enough to show cooperation. A cautious gesture. "I am cooperating with the police," he said, his voice low but firm. "I am asking for a little respect." But tonight, it seemed, respect was not on the menu. The officer did not budge. Her voice rang out again, louder this time, sharper. "Hands where I can see them. Now." Nathaniel's eyes flicked from her to the hand gripping the gun. He could feel the change in the air in an instant. The familiar sounds of the supermarket, the rolling of carts on tile, the hum of conversation, suddenly dissolved into tense silence. Everyone stood still, caught up in the moment, eyes oscillating between him and the officer. He felt his breathing slow, as if instinctively adjusting to the situation. This wasn't a battlefield. This was a supermarket. But things were happening fast, too fast. And now the phone was raised, the lens recording every move. Taking a deep breath, he kept his voice steady. "Officer, there's no need to do this. I've done nothing wrong." But her eyes were still burning with suspicion. They didn't waver as she ordered. "Get on the ground. Now." Nathaniel hesitated. The supermarket floor was dirty beneath him, cold and sticky. Not like the mud of the battlefield where he'd knelt in the name of duty. No, this was an insult. A stain on his honor. But all around him, the crowd was growing. Eyes, phones, recording this moment. And he knew, one wrong move, and it could all be a disaster. Nathaniel crouched, slowly lowering himself to his knees, then lying down. She barked a stern command, her voice strained. Her gun was now drawn, the black barrel pointed directly at him. A gasp echoed through the crowd. A mother hurriedly covered her small child's eyes, while an older man muttered angrily. "What is she doing? He hasn't done anything yet." Nathaniel looked up from his position on the floor. His sharp eyes didn't blink, his voice even but carrying an iron determination. "Officer, I am a retired senior military officer. I have served this country for over 20 years. This, whatever it is, it's not right." Her lips pressed together. A flash of confusion crossed her face, but she immediately regained her stance, her voice as sharp as a knife. "Don't move. You don't get to decide what's right or wrong here." The crowd began to whisper, the chatter growing louder, encouraged by Nathaniel's calm and firm demeanor. A man stepped forward, holding a phone, filming the whole thing. "Ma'am, you're wrong. He didn't do anything. Put the gun away." The officer glared at him. "Back off. This has nothing to do with you." But the crowd didn't back down. The voices of protest gradually rose like a tidal wave, each one a different sentence, each voice a different anger. "What did he do? Why did you point a gun at him?" A woman shouted, her eyes filled with anger. Nathaniel glanced at the crowd, feeling their invisible support, but he kept his eyes on the officer. He knew this situation could go either way. He kept his voice calm, almost a whisper, as if it were just the two of them in the room. "You're making a mistake. Take a step back and think." But she wasn't listening. Sweat beaded on her forehead, her grip on the gun grip tightened. Control was slipping away from her, and she knew it. The atmosphere was tense, one wrong move, one sudden jerk, and everything could fall apart. Then a loud voice rang out, breaking the tense silence. "What's going on here?" All eyes turned to the person who had spoken. The store manager, a middle-aged man with a name tag that read, Greg, rushed over, followed by a young security guard named Trevor. Trevor looked stunned as he took in the scene before him, the cop with his gun drawn, Nathaniel on the floor, and the crowd holding up their phones to film it all. Greg stepped forward, his voice steady but tinged with concern. "What's going on?" There was a pause. No one answered immediately. The entire store held its breath, waiting to see who would break the deadlock. Greg stepped forward, her voice steady but carrying an undeniable sternness. "Officer, this is a convenience store, not a crime scene. What exactly are you charging this man with?" The officer didn't lower her gun, her gaze sharp but with a hint of hesitation. "Suspicious behavior. I have reason to believe he is shoplifting and possibly armed." Nathaniel remained kneeling on the floor, his hands raised, his eyes flashing with a mixture of anger and helplessness. For a moment, everything seemed to slow down. The atmosphere in the store grew heavier, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. Trevor glanced at Greg before speaking, his voice calm but firm. "Ma'am, I've been monitoring the security cameras. This gentleman isn't doing anything suspicious. He's just shopping." The officer's face hardened. "Are you sure about that?" Trevor took a deep breath, his gaze steady. "I can play the footage now if you want." The crowd began to stir, scrutiny and outrage spreading through the air. An older man standing nearby spoke up, "Let him go." Another woman shouted, "This is discrimination." The voice grew louder, like a tidal wave, making the officer waver. Her hand tightened on the gun, but she also trembled, realizing she was losing control of the situation. Her eyes flickered to the phones that were recording every moment, every expression on her face. Greg stepped closer, his voice calm but clear with warning. "Officer, I think it's time to cool down. This is not what you want." She swallowed, a moment of hesitation that seemed like an eternity. Then, finally, she took a step back, relaxed her shoulders, and slowly lowered her gun. "You're free to go." Her voice was gruff, but there was no hiding the slight tremor. Nathaniel slowly stood up, brushing the dust off his jeans. His voice was firm, but there was a deep resentment in it. "Free to go. I was just humiliated in front of everyone. Treated like a criminal. And for what? Because I was shopping when my skin wasn't like everyone else's." She bit her lip, her face flushed with embarrassment, but she didn't reply. Instead, she turned and walked quickly toward the exit, ignoring the whispers and the phones that still recorded her every move. Trevor stepped closer to Nathaniel, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Are you okay?" Nathaniel smiled faintly, but there was a hint of bitterness in his eyes. "I don't know. But at least today, I'm not alone." Outside the store, a gentle breeze blew, but it was not enough to dispel the cold feeling in everyone's hearts. "Sir, I'm so sorry you had to go through that." Nathaniel raised his hand, giving a forced but sympathetic smile. "It's not your fault, but this can't happen again." As Nathaniel left the store, he was overcome with a heavy feeling. Anger, humiliation, sadness, but most of all, regret. He wished he could have spoken up sooner, or stopped it before it happened. Videos of that night began to circulate online, causing a wave of outrage and demands for accountability. The conversation about justice and accountability exploded not only in the local community but across the country. When Nathaniel returned home, his phone rang non-stop. Family, friends, and even former co-workers were reaching out, sending him links to the viral video. Footage of the officer pulling his gun on him in the middle of the supermarket went viral, shared on social media with attention-grabbing captions. "Racism at its worst. Veteran humiliated over a shopping trip." Newspapers and news outlets quickly jumped in. Local stations in Sacramento started, but soon national media joined in. On social media, hashtags like #JusticeForNathaniel and #antiracism trended. Veterans groups released documents condemning the officer's actions, and civil rights organizations called for a full investigation. Nathaniel's phone rang again. It was a reporter from a major news outlet asking for an interview. But Nathaniel wasn't ready to speak publicly. He needed time to process the range of emotions: anger, frustration, sadness, and disbelief. But there was another feeling in his heart, deep and impossible to ignore: determination. This was no longer just his problem. Meanwhile, the police department was facing increasing pressure. The officer involved had been identified: Patricia Hayes, a police officer with 6 years of experience in the field. As public records began to emerge, they revealed past complaints of excessive force and discrimination against Officer Hayes. The department responded quickly, announcing that she had been suspended pending an internal investigation. But that was not enough to quell public outrage. Protests erupted outside the police station, with hundreds taking to the streets, holding signs that read emphatically, "Enough. Accountability." Videos of the incident continued to circulate, garnering millions of views and sparking heated debates about racial bias in law enforcement. The furor extended beyond social media to every street corner and conversation. For days after the incident, the department held a press conference. In front of dozens of cameras and scrutinizing eyes, the police chief stepped up to the podium. He was clearly embarrassed by the scrutiny. "We take these allegations very seriously," he declared, his tone stiff as he read from a prepared statement. "Officer Hayes' actions do not reflect the values of this department. Effective immediately, she has been terminated from her position." The announcement was met with mixed reactions. Some saw it as a step in the right direction, but others said it did not go far enough. "Firing an officer cannot fix a broken system," one angry protester exclaimed in an interview. As for Nathaniel, he finally decided to break his silence. Appearing on a major news program, he shared his story in a calm but determined tone. "This is not about me," he told the anchor, his eyes determined. "This is about making sure no one else has to go through what I went through." It's about accountability, about a more just future where everyone is treated with respect, no matter who they are or where they come from. The debate continues. The storm is only just beginning. Discussions about racism in policing are flooding news feeds, and debates are raging across the country. On social media, calls for systemic change are growing louder. Activists are using video evidence to expose the problems that still exist in law enforcement. For Nathaniel and countless others, this is more than just an isolated incident. This is a moment of awakening, a call to action. And they will not stop until justice is served. Nathaniel never thought he would become a public advocate. His life had been pretty quiet until an incident at the supermarket changed everything. From that moment on, he realized that there were things that could not be kept quiet. And he was no longer a bystander. Invitations to speak at events became more frequent. He was invited to join discussions about law enforcement reform and building more equitable communities. At first, this confused him. He did not seek attention, but he also understood that if he did not speak up, who would? He began to collaborate with local organizations, meeting people who were also hungry for change. Together, they analyzed the injustices that existed in the system, finding ways to fix them instead of criticizing them. Step by step, they built a foundation for real reform. The moment at the supermarket became more than a painful memory, but a driving force for Nathaniel to take action. One Saturday afternoon, under a bright sun, he stood before hundreds of people at a community rally. Veteran families, activists, ordinary people, all gathered. They held signs, chanted messages of justice and change. Nathaniel stepped to the microphone, his voice firm but no less emotional. Let me be clear. What happened to me was not an isolated incident. It was a symptom of something larger, a system that needs to change. But we can do it. Together, we can build a community where no one has to live in fear because of who they are or what they look like. The crowd erupted in applause, but Nathaniel kept his face stoic. This wasn't just about calling out bad individuals, it was about fixing broken systems. He continued. We need education about respect and understanding. We need clearer and fairer policies in law enforcement. And most of all, we need to come together to make sure that no one is left behind. He looked around, meeting hopeful eyes. So what can you do? Speak up when you see injustice. Support organizations that fight for equality. And most importantly, treat each other with the respect we all deserve. After the rally, Nathaniel walked away feeling lighter. He knew that the pain he had endured was not in vain. It had become the fuel for a larger fight, not just for himself, but for a future generation. Nathaniel knows the road ahead will be long. But he's undeterred. He's ready to keep fighting, not just for himself, but for the countless others who can't speak up for themselves. The supermarket incident is more than just a viral video. It's become a fire, a cry for justice, a cry for change. And for Nathaniel, it's a powerful reminder that even when battered by indignity and bias, the fight for what's right is always worth it. But this story isn't just his. If it touches your heart, don't let it stop here. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Speak up when you see injustice. Because every voice has power. We're not just telling stories, we're making history. Don't forget to subscribe to discover more stories that can change the world. Let's keep this conversation going.